I want to talk about the spectrum or the scale of durability when we talk about documents. Well, text and documents. Messages that enter that arena in the communication triad between author and audience. And they're going to enter that arena in some sort of signage, symbol, an icon, or an index arrangement. And those texts and when they become recorded and actually exist in a fixed material format, all right, and are copied even once. The first copy is called a holograph. If it's handwritten, it's called a manuscript. You don't need to know those terms, but there's language for this, okay? But anyway, if you're interested and want to keep on studying this, you can contact me. I can help you do an independent study, or you can I can start you off with a book on this. Just keep that in mind. But anyway, texts that exist in that arena are on a scale of durability between not permanent at all and permanent. So what is the opposite of permanent? Always existing. I guess the opposite would be never existing, but then you don't have a text. So the thing has to exist, but then if it quickly disappears, you know what I'm talking about. And there's actually a term for that end of the spectrum. It's called the ephemeral. So ephemera is the plural form for this. Well, actually singular and plural, and it just means that which disappears quickly. All right. So ephemera is wisps of cloud up in the sky on a windy day, or think of being on a beach and you're walking on the shore and you write your name on the sand. And is that a message that's in a physical arena, or an arena between an author and an audience? Well, yes, potentially correct, because that author put the message there and it's there waiting for an audience to arrive in that arena. I mean, sure, the author might be alone on that beach, but that message has now become displaced and fixed in that arena. The author can walk away and someone can come walking down 20 minutes later and see the name written in sand. But if it's a windy day, a wavy day, how long is that name written in sand going to last? So that text is ephemeral. What if you were to write, what if you were to write a message in pencil or whatever on, a tissue, a Kleenex, and you were to leave that outside, just outside in your lawn? How long would that Kleenex stay intact? How long would that message be readable? Over the course of 1 or 2 days, it would probably disintegrate, being left to the elements. So that's ephemera. It's a very ephemeral. Its duration is very short. So on the other hand, of the scale of permanence, of durability for text, you have the more or less permanent, which is your gravestones, your words chiseled in stone, right? I suppose we could do more about this. There's that golden orb that was released into space. You can read about this. Carl Sagan had a hand in designing this mission, if you will, and this orb has the figure of the Michelangelo figure of a man with the arms spread out and the square around it, and it has nature sounds. It has human sounds like laughter, a baby crying. It has mathematical symbols on it. You should actually take a little pause here, look online for this text engraved in metal that we sent out into space. And right now, I'm not sure where it is. I think it has exited our solar system already. So in theory, that's very permanent in theory, correct? But as soon as it gets caught into the suction of a black hole, it's a game over for that little, disk. But permanent messages here would be written in stone, right? However, because of the way we produce text now and documents, the way we can do this, right, is very interesting. In ancient times, well, let me just preface what I'm about to say with this right now. Speech is extremely ephemeral. because not the speech you have here. This isn't a fixed format. This is documented. It has a pretty good chance for permanence in the scale of duration because I've got it on multiple copies. I've got it in my computer. I've uploaded it to YouTube, etc., etc. So, but live speech, just you talking with some other person in the course of the day, pops out of the mouth, floats in the sound waves, gets into your head, gone. As far as a physical event, it's gone. As soon as the sound waves stop transmitting, it's done. Speech is extremely ephemeral. Now, in days before writing, the way to combat that was to find out your most important texts and to memorize them and to train your young to memorize them. And you had this tradition of oral transmission based on word for word memory. And that's one reason many of these older texts were written in poetry, because the rhythm and the meter, if you will, the poetic syntax, where you could hear it very, very clearly, you could hear it, the rhythm of the lines and the length of the lines, right? How many feet were in there and whatnot, poetic feet, could very quickly alert someone that they had mismemorized something when the meter wasn't right. Okay, so poetry is much more of a mnemonic device than people realize in terms of a culture that's transmitting its main text through speech, because they don't have the material to really produce fixed format documents, and they want to combat this notion of ephemera. So they're going to train hundreds of poets. And that's what the word Homer means. Homer is not the name of a person. Homer in Greek means poet. And it probably was a combination of hundreds of poets that eventually gave us the written document of some of our first Western epics, like the Iliad and the Odyssey. Now, that wasn't always the case. Those are older ones. Old English, you have Gilgamesh, Beowulf. But during Roman times, you actually had an author writing it out, because we had writing now. So Virgil and the Aeneid, I mean, he actually wrote that thing out. That's only the creation of Virgil. We know his name, and it was, but Homer is a whole different story. So one way to combat ephemera is just to attack the problem of the disappearing text by creating hundreds of copies of it, and the copies have to be as exact as possible. Nowadays, newspapers are very ephemeral. They're tissue thin. The good old-fashioned handheld newspaper. Tissue thin. You leave a newspaper sheet out on the lawn. Again, it's going to fall apart within a week. Drops into the water. Bye-bye newspaper, right? So the ink smears. I mean, ephemera. But the way you can combat that is to print 100,000 of them. You know what I'm saying? And put a few in a library. And get the humidity in the library right, etc. Now, when microfiche came along and all that, things got a lot easier to make permanent copies. But books that are cheaply printed are going to fall apart within 15, 20 years. The paper has acid in it, so it turns yellow. The glue has acid in it, so it breaks apart. If you ever had an old book where the pages are literally falling apart, or you smell that old book smell, which is literally the paper and the ink decomposing because of the acid in the paper, or that you've opened a book and it sort of creaked open and then the spine snapped, okay, all of that relates to the cheap materials that were used to mass produce the book. And the industry that did that was saying, yeah, we're using cheap paper, yeah, we're using cheap glue, this book's going to fall apart in 20 years, but we're going to print 100,000 of them, so there's going to be some copy that's going to last, a long time, so sometimes it's just the overwhelming numbers, even though and each particular instance of the book is cheap and almost ephemeral, it because of the sheer number of production, it probably will last out there, so last a long time, be durable. So durable. So messages and text are in a chain of durability. And of course, when it comes to religious texts, this is important. Right? How do we know that we have the original message? How did the oral tradition work to preserve that message? How did the scribes combat the two things? One, the ephemeral nature of oral tradition, so they're actually combating that by writing it down. But then they're also trying to combat the scarcity of paper, which is one reason books at the beginning and roll scrolls and whatnot, codices, were extremely expensive, because paper for a long time, except in China, but for a long time was very hard to produce. And then even first papyrus, and then there's a whole history of this. And again, if you're interested in this, I have a great book that I think you would be interested in. Very readable. You'd have to do that on the side for an honorific or from an honorary title to the degree, like cum laude or summa cum laude. We can talk about that if you want to, but it's just something to know. The scale of durability when it comes to the way a text can last. Nowadays, with modern technology, with the cloud, with multiple servers, you almost need a nuclear meltdown, to take down stuff that 300 years ago would never have lasted a month, in terms of being physically preserved.